Your battery bank just died. Not from age, from physics. The EMP hit 30 seconds ago, and you didn't even know it happened. No flash, no sound. Just every semiconductor in a 100-mile radius turning into sand. Your bunker door, electronic lock, won't respond. You're trying the backup keypad. Nothing. The ventilation system that filters your air, it runs on a microcontroller. Gone. Your water purification with its UV sterilizer and electronic sensors, offline. The freeze-dried food is fine. The ammunition is fine. You are not fine. Because every piece of technology you spent 3 years stockpiling has one thing in common. It has a circuit board. And circuit boards don't survive Compton electrons. You built a fortified tomb and locked yourself out. This is what World War III actually looks like. Not mushroom clouds, system collapse, and there are 3 warfare scenarios that make your bunker irrelevant. Every prepper I've ever met thinks they've got World War III handled. They've got their freeze-dried food, 5 years' worth stacked in Mylar bags. They've got water filtration, ceramic filters rated for 10,000 gallons. They've got ammunition, thousands of rounds sorted by caliber. They've got a fortified location, steel-reinforced, buried, or remote. They think they're ready. Wrong. Modern warfare isn't about blast radius. It's not about fallout or radiation zones or mushroom clouds. Those are the threats your grandfather prepared for. The first strike in any major conflict today is electromagnetic pulse, EMP, and it doesn't destroy buildings. It destroys systems. Here's how it works. A nuclear warhead detonates at high altitude, somewhere between 40 and 400 kilometers up. The explosion itself is irrelevant. What matters is the gamma-ray burst. Those gamma rays slam into the upper atmosphere and knock electrons loose from air molecules. This creates a cascade of Compton electrons, billions of them, moving at near light speed. They interact with Earth's magnetic field and generate an intense electromagnetic pulse that propagates downward at the speed of light. Every electronic device in the affected area, we're talking hundreds to thousands of miles depending on altitude, experiences a massive voltage spike. Transistors burn out, microchips fry. Anything with a semiconductor junction dies instantly. Your phone, your car's electronic fuel injection, your solar charge controller, your generator's voltage regulator, your water pump, your ham radio, your night vision, your backup communications, all of it, dead in less than a microsecond. And here's what the preparedness industry doesn't advertise in big letters. Your bunker is full of electronics. That fancy air filtration system with the electronic controls, the security system with cameras and motion sensors, the LED lighting, the digital locks, the well pump that brings water up from 200 feet, the charge controllers managing your solar panels and batteries. You've built a fortress that depends entirely on the same fragile technology that just got turned into expensive trash. Conventional preppers are actually more dependent on electronics than the average person. You've concentrated your survival capability into systems that require microcontrollers, solid-state relays, and digital interfaces. When the pulse hits, you're not just without power. You're without the ability to generate power, to pump water, to communicate, to coordinate. You're isolated in a fortified position with no information, no contact, and no way to know if help is coming or if everyone else is just as dark. The irony is perfect. You spent years building electronic dependency into your prep and calling it resilience. But there's a technology that survives EMP. It's been around since the 1940s. The military uses it, and you've never heard of it because an EMP-proof civilian population is a population they can't control. The military solved EMP vulnerability in the 1950s. They never stopped using vacuum tubes in critical systems. Here's why. A vacuum tube and a transistor both control electrical current, but the mechanism is completely different. A transistor uses semiconductor junctions, microscopic regions where different types of silicon meet. When the Compton electrons from an EMP hit those junctions, the voltage spike destroys the crystalline structure. The transistor dies. A vacuum tube has no semiconductors. It's a sealed glass envelope with metal electrodes inside. Electrons flow through vacuum. There's nothing for the pulse to fry. The tube just keeps working. The Air Force still uses vacuum tube electronics in the avionics of B-52 bombers. ICBM launch systems run on tubes. Submarine communication arrays, tubes. These systems were designed in the Cold War when EMP was a known threat, and nobody's replaced them because tubes are invulnerable. You can buy vacuum tube radios right now. Vintage shortwave receivers, ham radio transmitters, tube amplifiers. They're not marketed for EMP protection. They're sold to audiophiles and radio hobbyists. But the physics doesn't care about the marketing. The tubes work. And when every solid-state device in a 100-mile radius is dead, you'll have communications. But tubes alone aren't enough. You need storage protection. That's where Faraday cages come in. A Faraday cage is a continuous conductive enclosure that blocks electromagnetic fields. The principle is simple. When an electromagnetic wave hits a conductor, it induces currents in the surface. Those currents create their own electromagnetic field that opposes the incoming wave. If the enclosure is complete, the fields cancel and nothing gets through. Michael Faraday demonstrated this in 1836. For EMP protection, the gaps in your enclosure can't be larger than 1/20th of the wavelength you're blocking. EMP frequencies range from about 1 kHz to 100 MHz. You need gaps smaller than about 2 centimeters. A metal trash can with a tight-fitting lid works. A steel ammo box works. Aluminum foil wrapped around a cardboard box, multiple layers, works if you're careful about seams. What you're protecting matters. Solar charge controllers, ignition modules for generators, radios, hard drives with critical data, medical devices, any electronics you'll need when the grid is gone. Put them in nested protection. A Faraday box inside a Faraday room is even better. Cost for a household-level setup, you're looking at $200 to $500. Grounded metal boxes, copper mesh, spare electronics. This isn't theoretical. This is tested. The military does it. You can do it. So why isn't this standard? Why isn't every critical system sold with EMP hardening built in? Because EMP-hardened civilians are a nightmare for post-war control. If you can communicate, coordinate, and organize while everyone else is dark and panicked, you're ungovernable. That's why the economics of keeping you vulnerable matter more than your survival. So why isn't every house pre-wired with Faraday protection? Why aren't consumer electronics sold with EMP hardening instructions included in the box? Why isn't this standard procedure in every preparedness guide published by the government? 2 reasons. Neither is technical. Reason 1. Telecom business model. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile. They make money by owning the infrastructure and renting you access. Monthly fees. Service contracts, data caps. Their entire revenue stream depends on you being dependent on their towers, their satellites, their fiber optic networks. If you've got EMP-hardened tube radios and mesh networks, if you can communicate peer-to-peer without their infrastructure, they lose you as a customer. Not just during the crisis. After it. Post-disaster rebuilding is a $1 trillion opportunity. After Hurricane Katrina, telecom companies got $2.3 billion in federal contracts to rebuild communications infrastructure. After the 2011 Tohoku earthquake in Japan, NTT Docomo got $800 million. The business model requires destroyed infrastructure. If civilian communications stay online through the disaster, there's nothing to rebuild. No contracts, no emergency appropriations from Congress. Your resilience is their loss. Reason 2. Government control. Emergency powers depend on communication breakdown. A population that can't coordinate, that can't organize, that can't verify information, is a population that waits for official instructions. You shelter in place. You wait for FEMA. You comply. But a population with hardened communications, they coordinate. They organize. They verify. They become difficult to manage. Look at the FEMA preparedness guidelines. Publicly available. You can read them right now. They tell you to stockpile water and food. They tell you to have a battery-powered radio. They do not tell you how to build a Faraday cage. They do not explain EMP vulnerability. The focus is always shelter in place and await further instructions. That model requires you helpless. It requires you waiting. The insurance industry won't touch it. No coverage for EMP damage. No incentive to educate customers on hardening. And there's a liability problem. If a company taught you how to harden your electronics and you did it wrong and your equipment still failed, you'd sue. It's cheaper to keep you ignorant than to accept responsibility for your protection. The pattern is clear. Your vulnerability is profitable and controllable. But EMP isn't the only first strike weapon. There's something more patient, more distributed, and deadlier. Because by the time you notice it, you've already been poisoned. Welcome to Weaponized Biology. Your water filter is rated for 99.9% bacteria removal. Sounds good. It's not. Prions are 10 times smaller than viruses. Chemical toxins are individual molecules. Your filter doesn't even see them. Modern biowarfare isn't smallpox or anthrax. Those are too obvious, too detectable, too treatable. Vaccines exist. Antibiotics work. Medical infrastructure can respond. The new vectors are different. Prion-like proteins. Misfolded, self-replicating, they destroy brain tissue over months. Synthetic toxins. Novel molecules engineered in labs. No natural antibodies. No existing treatments. Delayed action agents. Dormant for weeks. Then activate on a chemical or environmental trigger. Water treatment plants remove particulates. Bacteria, sediment, visible contaminants. They don't remove dissolved molecules. Your municipal water goes through filtration, maybe some chlorination. Molecules pass right through. Standard carbon filters in home systems, they're rated for 0.5 to 5 microns. A virus is about 0.1 microns. A prion is 0.01 microns. An individual toxin molecule is 0.0001 microns. The filter can't catch what it can't see. Food supply, same problem. Centralized processing means a single insertion point reaches millions. Testing is minimal. They check for known contaminants, bacteria like E. coli or Salmonella, pesticide residues on an approved list. Novel synthetic compounds. They're not on the test panels. Nobody's looking for them. Pharmaceutical supply chain, that's the easiest vector. 90% of active pharmaceutical ingredients are manufactured in China and India. Quality control is spotty. Inspection is rare. If you wanted to contaminate a population quietly, you'd introduce trace amounts of a delayed action agent into common medications. Blood pressure pills, diabetes medication, antibiotics, compounds. People take daily for months or years. The strategy is patience. You contaminate the supply 2-3 months before war declaration. The population gets dosed gradually. Nobody notices symptoms yet. Then when the conflict starts, you've got a population that's cognitively impaired, physically weakened, or about to get very sick. They can't fight effectively. They can't organize. They're dependent on medical intervention that isn't coming. You can't stockpile against a threat you don't know exists yet. Your 5-year food supply. What if the agent was already in the processing plant when the food was packaged? Your water. What if the contamination is molecular? There are prophylactic compounds and molecular filtration systems that work. They're not sold at Costco. And the reason why tells you everything about who decides what you're allowed to protect yourself from. There are drugs that block prion replication. There are chelation therapies that bind and neutralize synthetic toxins. There are broad-spectrum antivirals that work on novel pathogens. You can't buy them. Here's why. Pharmaceutical business model. Treatment generates recurring revenue. Prevention is a one-time purchase. If you take a prophylactic compound that makes you immune to a class of threats, the company sells you one bottle and never sees you again. But if you get sick and need treatment, you're buying medication for months, maybe years. Chronic care is profitable. Prevention is not. The compounds exist. Pentosan polysulfate blocks prion replication. It's used in rare cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, but only after diagnosis, not as a preventive. Edtacylation binds heavy metals and some synthetic toxins. It's FDA approved for lead poisoning, not prophylactic use. Broad-spectrum antivirals exist in research labs. They're not approved for anything because the FDA requires you to prove a specific disease threat before approving treatment. That's the catch-22. You can't get prophylactic approval without a diagnosed threat. But if there's a diagnosed threat, it's too late for prevention. You're in treatment mode, and treatment mode requires institutional access. You need a prescription. You need a doctor. You need a pharmacy. You're dependent. Molecular filtration is the alternative. Reverse osmosis systems filter at the molecular level. They work. A good RO system costs $2,000 to $3,000. It requires electricity and consistent water pressure. Some municipalities restrict them because they waste water in the filtration process. California, Nevada, places with water scarcity. The regulations make it difficult. Distillation works too. Boil water, capture the steam, condense it. Pure H2O. Everything else, dissolved minerals, toxins, molecules, they stay in the boiling chamber. But distillation is energy intensive. It's slow. A countertop distiller processes maybe 4 liters in 6 hours. Nobody markets this as a solution. It's sold as a niche product for people who want pure water for coffee. The government perspective is clear. An armed civilian population is tolerated. A chemically independent population is not. If you can't prevent exposure, if you can't filter at the molecular level, you must seek treatment when things go wrong. And treatment means you come to them. Post-crisis leverage. We have the antidote. Here are the terms. But there's a third weapon that's already deployed, already working. And it doesn't require poisoning your water. It requires poisoning your perception. The most effective WW3 weapon makes you destroy yourself. You're in your bunker. Food secured. Water filtered. Communications hardened. Everything you can control, you've controlled. Then your neighbor knocks on the door. He says the government is rounding people up, taking them to camps. He says your family is on a list. Do you believe him? Do you let him in? Do you shoot him? Do you run? That's the weapon. Uncertainty. Cognitive warfare. Operations targeting perception, belief, and decision-making. Modern conflicts aren't won through physical destruction. They're won through information fragmentation, trust collapse, decision paralysis. Russian doctrine calls it reflexive control. You feed the target contradictory narratives until they can't distinguish truth from manipulation. Chinese military calls it the 3 warfares: psychological, media, legal. Make resistance seem futile, illegal, or insane. Social media is the delivery system. Algorithmic amplification pushes fear and outrage. Deepfake technology makes video evidence unreliable. Bot networks create artificial consensus. You can't trust what you see. You can't trust what others claim to see. By the time war is declared, the population is already fragmented. You can't organize because you don't know who to trust. You can't coordinate because every message could be a psyop. Your bunker becomes an isolation chamber. No information, no context. You're making decisions based on fear and incomplete data. Physical prep is worthless if you attack allies thinking they're enemies. If you hide when you should move. If you're predictable because your responses have been mapped and gamed. The weapon is installed before the war starts. You're already carrying it. There is a defense. But it's not technology. It's discipline. And like the other threats, the system doesn't want you to have it. Let's look at the pattern. 3 threats. 3 buried defenses. 1 pattern. EMP hardening equals communication independence. You can coordinate without their towers, organize without their infrastructure. Biodefense equals pharmaceutical independence. You don't need their treatments because you prevented exposure. Cognitive discipline equals narrative independence. You can think clearly when everyone else is fragmented and panicked. Each defense breaks a control mechanism that post-war authority depends on. The economics are identical across all three. Telecom companies lose subscription revenue if you're EMP-proof. Pharmaceutical companies lose treatment revenue if you're prophylactically protected. Media corporations lose advertising and influence revenue if you're cognitively sovereign. Markets are built on temporary solutions that require renewal. A customer who solves their problem permanently is a customer they lose forever. But it's deeper than profit. Modern governance requires population legibility. You must be visible, trackable, predictable. Hardened civilians eliminate that legibility. If you can communicate in the dark, they can't control information flow. If you can't be poisoned, they can't leverage treatment access. If you can't be manipulated, they can't predict your behavior. The threats aren't kinetic. They're systemic, psychological, molecular. The defenses aren't stockpiles. They're capabilities, knowledge, networks. The bunker mentality is the problem. Isolated, paranoid, dependent on pre-purchased solutions. They don't want you hardened. They want you hiding. Hiding is predictable. WW3 isn't coming. The war is already here. It's just not the war you prepped for. Here's what actually prepares you. Here's what real preparedness looks like. Not a shopping list. A discipline list? Cognitive hardening. Information literacy. Learn to verify sources. Identify logical fallacies. Recognize emotional manipulation. Practice daily. When you see a headline, ask who benefits from you believing it. Compare multiple sources. Sit with uncertainty. Decision-making under incomplete information is a skill you train, not a problem you solve. Network resilience. Local coordination beats lone wolf stockpiles. Build redundant communication now. Tube radios and Faraday cages. Mesh-tastic nodes. In-person networks with people you've met, whose skills you know, whose stability you've tested. Your neighbor with medical training is worth more than another case of ammunition. Run drills. Test the networks before you need them. Distributed knowledge. Skills can't be EMP'd. First aid, water purification, food preservation, basic chemistry. Learn them. Teach them. Resilience multiplies when shared. Physical minimums. Yes, have water, food, medical supplies. But portability beats fortification. The bunker is a static target. Mobility and adaptability are survival. Information sovereignty. Build offline libraries. USB drives in Faraday boxes. Printed manuals. Download this transcript. Archive critical knowledge before access gets restricted. The shift is from what can I buy to what can I do? What do I know? Who can I coordinate with? Preparedness is capability, not accumulation. Share this information. The more people who understand the actual threats, the harder we are to control. The system isn't hiding this behind walls. It's hiding it behind noise, behind 1,000 inferior solutions screaming for your attention. WW3 won't look like Fallout. It'll look like Tuesday, except you won't know what's real anymore, unless you prepare your mind first. Stay ungovernable. Truth doesn't require permission.